Okay, welcome back everybody. This is going to be episode 5 of my tips and tricks series, and in this video here we're going to be going over the basics for masking of canopies. Again, you're going to see the process that I have adopted for my own models, and what I do works best for me. But as always, as I've said in almost every video like this, what I do is what I do. If you guys have a better process that you use, by all means, use what you want to use. This is just a primer for those people who are just getting into this hobby. If you guys have any tips and tricks for me, and you want me to try anything, leave it all down there in the bottom, and I will do a follow-up video down the road where I try out your ideas to see how they work for me. So, without further ado, let's get this going. My name is Sean, and as always, this is Sean's Aviation. And just before we jump into this video, I just want to say that I am recording this on June 6th of 2019, and it is the 75th anniversary of D-Day. And unfortunately, I am stuck at home. I wasn't able to get out to any of the many memorials that are happening around the world, especially those that are happening in Normandy themselves. But I just want to make a note of the supreme sacrifice that many nations and many individuals made on that day 75 years ago today to help liberate the world from the tyranny of the Nazis. So if any of you are out there, you know, I wish I could be out there at some of those. Okay, so in this video, we're going to be going over the basics of masking, and for this particular one, we're going to do canopies, which is usually the most difficult aspect of masking a model. There's a couple of different ways it can be done. I've seen people use, well, you can buy the Tamiya pre-cut canopy masks. Give me 1 second, I'll pull some out. So yeah, you can buy these guys here, Edward pre-cut canopy masks. There's a couple of different companies that make these. The two that I know off the top of my head are Edward and a company here based in Canada called Easy Mask. They use vinyl. But there's a number of other companies out there on the market now that are doing this. This particular stuff, the Edward stuff, is using, it's the Tamiya Tape. It's the thin yellow tape. It's the exact same tape you get in the Tamiya. There's a name for it for the life of me. Can't remember the exact term, but this is all pre-cut, designed for the model, and it comes with the fancy-dancy Edward instructions, and you can easily go through and see how it shows what part on the so you can see, for example, here the tail turret. It shows you sort of what part goes where, and it has the arrows explaining each little section. And it goes through, those are the fuselage windows, there's your upper turret, there's a lot of your nose stuff. If you flip it on the other side, you know, you'll see the cockpit areas and the ball turret and all that fun stuff. So it includes all of the instructions, exactly, everything's pre-cut, it's perfect fit, so that you never have to worry about mixing it up. The downside, you know, depending on where you live, these things somewhere in the neighborhood of, you know, $10 give or take per kit. And then you start adding shipping. You know, it starts to become an expensive proposition when you're trying to get these things sent to areas outside the U.S. You know, inside the U.S., $5.99, $6.99 U.S. You know, in some cases you get free shipping or cheap shipping. It's worth it, but you start, you know, exchange rate and international shipping. You know, these definitely start to become a little on the pricey side. I bought a bunch of these back in the day. I have since stopped. So, back to where I was going with that. This is usually the easiest option for your masking. I've seen people do foil. If you're good at, if you know how to foil an aircraft using aluminum foil or whatnot, you can foil the canopy and then cut around the edges, leaving the windows masked. I've seen people who will actually paint decal paper the same color as the canopy, as the camo or the outside color, and then actually use decal strips to decal the canopy frames instead of painting. You can hand do it, get a fine brush and do it by hand. If you're airbrushing the model, it doesn't always work out the best. So there's a number of different ways. The way I do it, and the way I'm going to show you how I do it today, is just using Tamiya tape, a burnishing tool, an X-Acto knife, a good pair of tweezers, and you can finish up with, you know, a decent looking masked canopy. That's the forward canopy for the Focke-Wulf 190. So I will show you in this segment here. I'll do the rear part of the same canopy. I'm going to try my best to keep this in frame. I'm going to mark a little bit of an edge here so that I do, you know, my best to keep keep my work in the frame. Nothing worse than trying to show something and get the workspace out of frame. So that right there is going to be my workspace. So framing canopies. So the first thing you need to do is make sure that the canopy itself has been cleaned up, ready to go, and looks good. Second thing, and it is always a good thing, have your instructions handy and make sure that you're actually masking the proper area. Sometimes it can be difficult to tell whether a certain area is supposed to stay clear or painted. You know, not easy to tell sometimes. So keep the instructions close by. Always makes life easy. So take off a small strip of the Tamiya tape. I tend to try make my life easy. The straight edge of the tape, I will go along the straightest edge I can find on a particular area. It just saves you the trouble of cutting down the line. So you line up one side and then just gently put it out. Make sure you've got as much of it as down as possible. You want to keep it as straight as possible. Always make sure you have overhang. This edge here I'm not too worried about because I'm going to lay another piece of tape along that angle. So not terribly worried. Burnishing tool, just go along the edges. Because the canopies have a lip between the clear part and the part that's supposed to stay painted, you can use the burnishing tool and get right down in there and make sure it's in there tight. Now, X-Acto knife. I always use the number 12 blade. Make sure it's nice and sharp. If you start using a dull blade, this doesn't work as well, and it doesn't take much pressure at all. Just the weight of the blade. You know, don't push too hard and just let it follow its own natural course along that lip. You pop it off, and there you go. That's it, folks. That is how you mask. It does take a little bit of practice to kind of get used to the pressure and knowing kind of what order to do things in to make everything work. You can easily kind of get yourself out of whack and end up making a ton more work for yourself than you need. So that's that. So I'll take another piece of Tamiya tape here and I'll do the other side. So same thing. Get one corner lined up, pinch it, and then pull it across the straight edge. Get it as straight as you can. And then use your burnishing tool to force down all the edges. This also ensures that you're not going to get any bleed under. There's nothing worse than spending all of this effort masking a canopy, and then you paint and you pull the masking tape off, you get a little bit of paint that bled underneath the edge of the masking tape, and you've basically ruined your canopy. So that's never fun. So you always want to make sure that you have it burnished down in all your edges. There's no little spaces for any leakage to happen. This is where it can get funny, where you're trying to do a curved space. The best thing I can find I always do is you hold it up to the light. So you have the light shining through the back, and then it's easier to show off. Let's see if I can actually get that on the camera. You'll actually be able to kind of see the outline of where Let's see if I can do this. So there's the light. Get you cranked down. So you'll see if you actually hold it up against the shadow, you can see the outline of that burnished line a little bit better than if you had not. So you can hold it up to the light and you can find where that line is, and then kind of gently, I find if I hold the knife in a steady position and then I rotate the canopy piece around, that tends to work the best. You'll find sometimes that if you hadn't put enough pressure, it doesn't cut all the way through. So take a couple of swipes at it, go in one direction, then go back in the other direction, and that ensures that any bits you missed get cut the second time. But the key is to go gentle and slow, because if you go too fast or you push too hard, you will not follow the line you want to follow. There. Get you back up here. Ba, 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 ba. Good framing. Close enough. So yeah. It's also good habit to have multiple sizes of Tamiya tape. So I've got the 6mm, the 10mm, and the 18mm. So it just gives you a nice difference in thickness. So 6, 10, 18. This is the one, the 10 is what I normally use. This is also good for some compound curves. And then for the really tight curves, I picked up the Tamiya pinstriping tape, which allows you to do some really nice tight curves. But I don't use that very often. I tend to stick between the 6 and the 10. You can get the vast majority of what you need done. So an example here, there's this little tiny corner right here. It's a little easier to get the 6mm. There you go, just less overlap that you gotta worry about at the end. Now this canopy here has a little tiny strip down the top, so I'm going to continue to use the smaller 6mm tape since I don't want too much of it covered. It's a lot easier to do it in small sections than it is to try to do it in one big piece because of the compound curves. So that automatically gives me that line, and all I have to worry about is trimming this little section here at the front. So that's the other side of how you kind of want to do it. If you're going to use smaller pieces, you can, like I said, use the straight edge of the tape to follow straight edges of the canopy and reduce the amount of trimming you have to do. So keep the cutting down to a bare minimum, because every time you cut, you're opening yourself up to missing a line, or scratching the canopy, or just generally screwing things up. And trust me, if it's possible to screw it up, you're going to find a way to do it. So you can see that in this example here, get it all in place. Now this overlap I have at the end, I can actually use framing. I've left a little bit of the overlap on this side, a little bit of a longer piece. So this little piece here, I have the dangly bit. When I cut that, this piece here, I can now use to frame or to mask the back end. So I'm using my offcuts to help mask the smaller zones that need to be done. So I never throw any of my tape out. I always keep the masking tape. I have a little pile over here on the corner. I just keep sticking all the little bits of masking tape to itself, because down the line you never know when you're going to need a small piece. So for example, like I said, this little offcut, I'll use that right there, and then I can keep a bubble in the middle to ensure that that little piece, now that little antenna, that the little bump, you can see a little bump sticking out the top. That little bump is actually a little antenna. It needs to be painted the fuselage color, but I'll do that by hand later on. It's just a little too difficult to mask off accurately. You know, it's just as easy to take a small brush and just touch that up later on. But there you go. That is that. That is the Canopy mask. So considering it would have cost me, like I said, $10 to $15 Canadian to get these things shipped up to me to mask in what, 5 minutes? I've got a Canopy masked off, and I mean, any miscuts I have in here are probably no worse than any application error you would have with a pre-cut mask, right? If you screw up the positioning, it's not much different. So, bit of practice. If you're just new at this, I recommend taking an older model or some spare canopies. You know, for example, my 190, the Dora 9, I have 2 different canopy hoods, so you can take one that you're not using. Practice. Make sure you know what you're doing, and there you go. So that's the basics of canopy masking. That probably is one of the more difficult ones with the compound curve at the back and whatnot. Yeah, not much else to it. Sharp knife, good tape, bit of patience, some practice, not too difficult. So then you take this, give it a coat of the interior gray color, and then the exterior color, and that way, if you look from this side, you see the interior color. From the outside, you see the outside color. And that's the easiest way to do it. So, as I said, canopy masking. Next little segment will probably be masking for camo. Last bit, like I said, don't forget, grab your burnishing tool. Just go along any of the little outside edges. Make sure everything is put down nice and tight. You don't want to find out later that there's a little hole and you got bleed through. There. Okay. Stay tuned. Next little bit's coming up soon.
Thank you for watching, guys, and as always, if you are interested in any of the content you see, you can access my website at www.seans-aviation.com. You can see all the latest pictures of aircraft and museums and the build logs of all of my current models and past models on that site. And if you're interested in any of this content, please click the subscribe button here on YouTube to follow more. Thank you very much, and see you guys next time.